This is Liz Colburn, host of The Morning Uplift. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Bobby Womack has saved the USA's life in this World Cup. Paul, the runner, loose ball, it's good. Gonzaga, the slipper still fits.
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag, it gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it. He's in. Patriots win the Super Bowl. Brady has his fifth.
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness. I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Good morning, Sports World. It's back. It's time for Wednesday morning sports talk. I'm Max Balduff. Keith Haney is with me, as always, here on Public House Media. Thank you for joining us in the cheap seats. We're in the cheapest of seats today, college football. Am I right, Keith?
The cheapest of seats in college football. What are you talking about, man? We are in prime time, luscious, padded seating right now, man.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm always about the understatement part of this sports world. Always about underselling something. It's never underestimate the capacity for understatement that we have here. Thank you again for joining us on the cheap seats. Wherever podcasts are found, we thank you for finding us. But today, before we get to the college game, we'll have a lengthy discussion about each of the Power 5 conferences, their chances in the college football playoff, and a way too early prediction for who is going to win. We need to start off on the professional gridiron. Odell Beckham Jr. got paid a Brinks truck and a half full of money for the next couple years to still play for the New York Giants. Keith, are you surprised he actually stayed with the New York Giants?
No, I'm not, because they're going to have a new quarterback coming up, so that can be exciting eventually. Eli Manning is on his way out. And until he leaves, he's still going to have one of the better arms throwing to him. So having the ability to stick with a maybe Hall of Famer, maybe not, that's a whole other conversation.
The dude 25.
I'm talking about Eli Manning.
Okay, that's a separate story. But pump the brakes there if we're talking about Beckham. Just pump the brakes.
I'm saying I'm not surprised he's staying in New York if he has the chance to stay with a potential Hall of Famer in Eli Manning as a quarterback for maybe 1-2 more years, and then seeing what other quarterback that they bring up for him. $65 million in total guaranteed cash, and it's New York. And him being the personality that he is, I think there's one of only two cities that can really handle him. That's New York and LA. And so, no, I don't think that it's a big surprise that he decided to stay.
And with New York, 5 years, $90 million. Whew. I think that's a lot of cash to be committing to a wide receiver. Remember, he is going to be the highest paid at his position.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that shows Odell Beckham Jr. what the Giants think of him, not only on the field but off the field as well. He's not just a wideout. He's a huge personality, someone that puts butts in the seats and sells a lot of jerseys for you. So although he can definitely help you out on the field, although he is only a wide receiver, he's helping your bottom line as well.
Now, where this contract expires remains an interesting one for Beckham. It expires when he's 31. At that point, do you think about maybe a sunset contract for the rest of his career, or is this the final contract he signs with the Giants?
I guess it all depends on how it goes, right? I mean, if he has an outstanding but if he has an outstanding, an outstanding time with the Giants throughout this contract, I wouldn't be surprised if they sign him to an extension to, as you said, kind of ride it out. But even 31, if he's able to take care of his body, if he has a good couple years, 31's not even all that ancient for a wideout. Running back, sure, but wide receivers, they can last and stay in their prime until about 34, 35. So he might actually have a decent 3 to 4 year contract after this one.
Now, instead of talking about contracts, our next story brings up the refusal to sign another contract and ride off into the retirement sunset. Manu Ginobili has finally retired from the National Basketball Association, longtime member of Dynasties Galore champion, and wow, what a guy. What a career he's had.
Well, 4 NBA championships. He won a gold medal for his country in the Olympics. Obviously, that Argentina team that beat the United States in the Olympics for a big upset, although the United States, they were really kind of a terrible team that year for USA standards in the Olympics. That's another story. But what a great career, and it's just one more piece that the Spurs are parting ways with. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard's no longer there, Tony Parker's no longer there, and now Manu is gone. Just one piece of that dynasty, one after another, is leaving, and Manu, for Spurs fans, that one has to be a tougher pill to swallow.
And with Manu Ginobili leaving, this will be the first time since 2002-2003 that the Spurs will not have him. That's how long his career has been. Like, he's been in basically every NBA video game.
That's true. That's an interesting way to look at it. When was he drafted?
He was drafted in the second round by the Spurs in 1999.
Yeah. Wow. That's man, thinking about it, that's a long time. That's before the year 2000. That's NBA Live. That's right after NBA Live 98. I have NBA Live 98 for Super Nintendo. So that one just misses them. So
wow, Super Nintendo. We're really throwing back at the clock here.
Oh yeah, that was my first system. That I'm kind of aging myself a little bit here, but
I can consciously remember playing a lot of was PlayStation 2, and the first big game that I was obsessed with was NBA Street Volume 2.
Okay, yeah.
Manu was in NBA Street.
Oh, really?
Like, I loved, and the NBA Street games were fantastic. Find me a better major sports video game soundtrack than NBA Street Volume 2.
Oh, you're not going to find one. That's what was so great about those street games, is that they had the best soundtracks. You're absolutely right. They had the music that, NBA Live and 2K, those games weren't going to have those soundtracks yet.
They also had DJ Cucumber Slice, which was the greatest color commentator known to basketball.
Man, now I could just go down memory lane about all the cool video games that I've played. But
And that's part of the joy of older players retiring. You get to walk down all of their seasons that they've had and just really see that he was kind of phased out of the starting lineup come like 2011, 2012. But Ginobili remained a staple of the Spurs. He was still part of that big Spurs squad that won their most recent championship. And I mean, what a guy. And this is kind of the end of the big Spurs. Like, who do the Spurs have left now? I'm forgetting.
No, and really they don't have any, huge names left, which is kind of the point that I was
Al Gasol?
Yeah. Well,
Well, DeMar DeRozan came back in the Kawhi trade.
That's true, yeah. But yeah, but Pau Gasol, he's not like really a big name anymore, I mean,
I'm looking at some of the names that they got on their roster, and I'm like, who are you people?
Yeah. But the great thing about Manu is that he fit in perfectly well with what the Spurs were trying to do. He was a great player, and he could have been so much more of a personality, but he wasn't. That's exactly what the Spurs needed, a superior talent and a guy that wasn't worried about all the statistics and, getting all those endorsements. He's just one of those guys that that went out, wanted to play basketball, and he did a great job for them and fit in great with their system. So I'm sure he's going to be greatly missed.
He fit together in the sense that he wasn't worried about looking good. He was worried about playing good.
Yeah. And what else can you ask for from a professional athlete?
Not a whole lot. Let's move to our final story before we get into college football, and it concerns baseball. And I understand we're going to hear some groans when I say this. We have to talk about the New York Yankees. The Yankees swept the Baltimore Orioles at the same time that the Tampa Bay Rays swept the Boston Red Sox. So that means the Yankees are a hot week away from being back in the division race. And that was their hot week. So are the Yankees back?
Well, I'm not so sure that they're back in the sense that they can really contend for that division. I mean, they're obviously, going to be one of those wild card teams. So I think they're set one way or another. However, if you're looking at it right now, as you said, 6.5 games behind the Red Sox right now, you're just another streak away from being right back in it. So are they back? Sure. They do have the opportunity to get back in that division race, but they still need so much help from, the Red Sox, not playing well and a bunch of other teams playing well. So we'll see, but if you're the Yankees, I think you just got to play your game, not make too hard of a push for it, because you're already in the wild card, right? So I think that you can afford to play, lack of a better term, comfortably, because you're going to be in the postseason one way or the other.
And this hot week, combined with the Seattle Mariners not doing so well in their big series against the Athletics, really helped the Yankees solidify being at least in the wild card position. Seattle's sitting pretty far back right now as the closest team in striking distance.
Yeah.
And then here come the Rays when they were winners of 8 in a row with that sweep of the Red Sox. And they're second back from Seattle. It's a weird wild card picture in the American League where they're kind of set, but there are a few teams that are just outside range that might get in with a hot week.
Right. And but I think that's the key word, right? A hot week. And when you're talking about a hot week in baseball, you're talking about having to rattle off a number of games in a row. Now, obviously, we've seen it with the Yankees, but the Yankees are playing Baltimore, right? So every team's going to have a hot week against Baltimore.
Hey, you watch it. The Orioles won Monday night, and I was there.
All right. What's their win total up to now? 39, 38? 38.
Yep. You're just about right with that.
So,
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, but I'm excited for the Yankees because I really want to see the Yankees in the playoffs every year. I'm going to be completely honest because I think baseball's better when you have the Yankees and the Red Sox in the postseason.
Yeah, you'll get no argument from me on that. And with that, it's time to actually argue about something. It's time to talk about college football. When we come back, we've got a lot of conferences to preview. We've divvied it up. ACC, Big 12, Big 10, coming your way next. We'll be right back on the Cheap Seats, brought to you on Public House Media by Squadcast.
This is Kim Meyer, the host of Choose to Rise here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Choose to Rise, where we talk about living with positive mindsets, how to increase our confidence, building our faith, and living out our life on purpose. A new show comes out via podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And if you want to catch the episode live instead, stop by Public House Media around 6:45 Central Standard Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday as well. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Choose to Rise. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
How's it going, everybody? This is Keith.
And Katie, hosts of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. When you're done here, I hope you'll check out our show, Coffee with Keith and Katie,
where we talk about our lives and relationship over a cup of coffee.
A new episode airs on Facebook Live every Monday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie.
Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
A lot of big questions in college football left to answer, such as, will Alabama repeat? We'll get to the SEC later, but don't worry about it. We have all of the questions right here on the Cheap Seat, brought to you on Public House Media by Squadcast. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Max. Keith is with me as always. And Keith, my friend, let's start with the ACC. Let's start at the top of the letters. Let's go alphabetical here. Let's really see. Man, is Clemson going to win again?
Yeah, I think Clemson's going to win again. I mean, that whole Atlantic division, that's Clemson's. They have Florida State. Florida State's the only other team that can really stick with Clemson, but Florida State's not there yet. They're still in their rebuilding phase, so Florida State doesn't have it. Miami on the other side in the Coastal Division, they're going to be that team, but are they equipped to beat Clemson in the ACC championship game again? No, they're not. Clemson, it's one of those things in college football. You sometimes know who the best team's going to be, and we've known the last number of years, ACC, that's Clemson's conference.
Yeah, I really think that Clemson for the last few years has just completely outclassed everybody else in the ACC with recruiting. They've just gotten the better players. Miami has come back from irrelevancy to relevancy again. Last year was a good coming out party for them where they kind of overachieved. Now they're expected to either do the same thing or be better. And looking down the list, I really just I have a hard time believing that teams like Boston College actually have a shot to make themselves big again. Like, I really have a hard time believing that the middling teams like Georgia Tech, BC, NC State, throw Louisville in the conversation as well, that they'll make it to that 6-7 win mark to make themselves relevant.
Right, and that's exactly it. The ACC, I'd say they're about the third best conference in college football right now, behind the SEC and the Big Ten. And the reason for that is because you said it. They have Clemson, they have Miami, and they have Florida State. But as we just mentioned, Miami and Florida State, they're not there yet to compete with Clemson. So really, you have a conference that is, excuse me, you have the conference that is brought to its prominence right now only because of one team, Clemson. And so you look at, as you said, you look at the rest of the conference, Pitt, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia. What are they going to do in that Coastal Division? They're not going to do anything in that. The only other team that you have that can possibly contend with Miami right now is Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech absolutely can, because I think something interesting that you mentioned is that now Miami is supposed to do something, and Mark Richt is great at bringing a team up to being a contender. But once that team is actually a contender, as we saw him do at Georgia, they played well, but they were never able to be that team. So we'll see, but I think this is Clemson's conference from top to bottom, no question.
I still think that the head-to-head matchups could be interesting with Clemson, Florida State, and even last year when Clemson lost to Syracuse, granted Syracuse pretty much had to injure Clemson's starting quarterback to get that win. Then again, they still won that game. But there's a lot that can happen with this sport, and I think Syracuse winning a game against Clemson was probably one of the least expected things from last season.
Right, and that Clemson game that you mentioned, Clemson at Florida State. Clemson is at Florida State, and it's in the middle of the season. It's in late October, and if Florida State comes off with a hot start, they play Virginia Tech week 1, and then you have a couple of cookie cutter games there. At Louisville will be tough, maybe. A lot of people think Louisville has what it takes to stay relevant, but I absolutely think they have no shot of staying relevant. So if you're looking at Florida State's schedule, they have a chance of being undefeated, going into that Clemson game that they have at home, if they can pull up a big upset at Miami. So that could definitely be the most important game of the season.
Let's go to the 10-team Big 12, because everything makes sense in college football. Does West Virginia, this is a serious question, Keith, does West Virginia have what it takes to knock off Oklahoma?
No. Well, they have a great quarterback, and in college football, that's really all you need, right? Will Grier, the quarterback for West Virginia, he's a senior. He is arguably the best quarterback in college football this year, one of the Heisman Trophy candidates. So obviously anything can happen in college football anyway. I mean, heck, Iowa State beat Oklahoma last year. That was their only defeat before they went into the college football playoffs. So I mean, yeah, West Virginia can absolutely beat them, but they really only have one superior player on their team to Oklahoma, and I think that's Will Grier. So they're really going to have to focus on their pass game if they have a chance of beating the Sooners. But, Oklahoma, a lot of people think that they'll have a down year after losing Baker Mayfield, but they have a great quarterback in Kyler Murray stepping in who better have a great year, because he foregone playing in baseball to be the starting quarterback for Oklahoma.
Now, I have another serious question with this, and it has to concern Texas Christian University, TCU. One of their big games to open the season in the non-conference slate is against Ohio State. Ohio State will not have their head coach, Urban Meyer, for that game. Does TCU rattle off a big win there? And is that big enough to potentially either raise their profile or lower Ohio State's profile come football playoff selection?
Oh, absolutely. That's the third game that, as you said, that's going to be Urban Meyer's last game of suspension. It's at Ohio State. TCU is a good team. They're ranked 15th, 16th in the country, so they're obviously no team that you can sleep on. Obviously, Ohio State is the favorite in that game. But if Ohio State limps out of the gates, maybe their first game and a half, that's going to be a tough TCU game. As I said, TCU is good. They definitely know how to play football, and there's so much more to gain for TCU than there is to lose for Ohio State, because Ohio State's going to get the benefit of the doubt throughout the entire year. So Ohio State, like Alabama, is one of those teams that you can lose early on in the year and still work your way back into that college football playoff. TCU, you're going to have to win that game at Ohio State if you have a shot at the playoff and contending with a team like Oklahoma. And I think that they can definitely do that.
Do you think it'll be enough? Who wins the Big 12?
Who wins the Big 12? I'm going to say Oklahoma.
This is where I'm going to disagree with you. I think West has got it.
Okay.
I really think having a great quarterback is enough in college football. I really think having a great quarterback can bring you to the promised land. And West Virginia has a real and true shot. They do have to get by a lot of teams to get there. They basically are only going to be allowed one loss all season. Maybe that loss can be in conference. They've really got to work at this. But I think they've got a chance.
But the one thing that really worries me about West Virginia is their schedule and how it falls. You know, they don't have that tough of a schedule in the first 3 quarters of the season, but their last 4 games now are, listen to this, at Texas. Now it's at Texas. Texas isn't that great, but maybe they will. You know, you never know with Texas. They always have the capability to have a breakout season. At Texas, TCU, then at Oklahoma State, and then Oklahoma. They have Oklahoma at home, but that's a tough 4 weeks to end the schedule out. So even if you get through Texas, TCU, and Oklahoma State, you still then have to play Oklahoma.
Man, I can still imagine that game could still decide the Big 12 at that point.
Oh, it absolutely could. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked either. I think that's exactly what the Mountaineers and the Sooners want. They kind of want that heavyweight clash to come right at the very end, the final big test before someone gets to be in the football playoff. And that would be great for the conference, right? Because a lot of people the last couple of years have really slapped on the Big 12, thinking that it's only Oklahoma's conference since Texas has been down for the last couple of years. So if it comes down to that matchup, that could be a huge boost for the conference as a whole.
Let's move to the Big Ten. There are so many questions with this conference. Let's start with the big one. Where does Ohio State finish?
Now, that's an interesting one because I think the Big Ten East, I think that's the toughest division in college football. You have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Michigan State all in the same division. And we all know that those 4 teams are going to finish 1 through 4 one way or another. Now, how Ohio State does, I think, relies greatly on how they adapt to these 3 weeks without Urban Meyer. The games are not all that tough. As we just mentioned, TCU, that's obviously going to be their toughest game, but that one is still at home. After that, they have Tulane, which is a W, but they have to start conference play out at Penn State right off the bat on September 29th. So that's going to be a tough way to start the Big Ten Conference, especially only after being with Urban Meyer 1 game after his suspensions, and Tulane's not going to test you. So you're going to potentially be hung over after playing a cupcake Tulane team, having to go straight to Penn State. But you know what? After that, it's pretty easy for them. Indiana, Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska. Those are a bunch of wins in the middle of the season that they'll need. And then at Michigan State, that one will be tough. And then Michigan's always tough. So Ohio State, I think that they're undefeated going into that Michigan game. I think that they're 11-0 going into that Michigan game at the end of the year.
I have a bold prediction, and I'm very willing to be wrong with this prediction. I think Ohio State fires Urban Meyer.
When?
When? Great question. When they come to their senses and realize that he did something wrong.
No, they've already had plenty of time to do that. You can't fire him now.
Okay. Since when was it acceptable to suspend a player 4 games for peddling equipment, but suspend a coach 3 games for knowingly denying that he knew something about a crime happening with one of his assistants? Since when was that acceptable?
Let me just play devil's advocate here, because I'm not saying I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm not saying that I disagree with you.
All right, stoke the fire, Keith. Let's break this go.
It's college football and it's Ohio State. It's acceptable because you're paying Urban Meyer millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, and he already brought you an undefeated season and a national championship, and that's good enough at a place like Ohio State. You know that.
If it was good enough at Ohio State, why was it not good enough at Maryland when DJ Durkin basically lost his job for how he was treating his players?
Well, you had someone die in Maryland.
Did somebody have to die at Ohio State for them to actually fire Urban Meyer?
Probably.
College football is a dumb business.
Does someone have to die at Ohio State? Yeah. It's a really dark place to go right now. But how long did it take for them to make a decision on DJ Durkin after a player died under him?
It took a little bit.
What's that?
It took a little bit.
It took Maryland a while and this whole thing to come out for people to be like, a player died after one of these workouts. Maybe we should better look into how they're doing things at Maryland. It took them a while at Maryland. It's a terrible football program. These schools and these athletic departments, they invest so much money into this coach, and this coach is in charge of a multi-million-dollar institution for these universities. And it's a terrible way to look at it, but these universities, these athletic directors, as proven, they're going to protect these valuable assets as much as they possibly can. So no way does Ohio State get rid of Urban Meyer. No way.
All right, let's get off this train. I understand we can talk about this train all the way into the season. I want to bring up one big non-conference game that I think will shape how Michigan states their case to the football playoff committee, and that will be Michigan-Notre Dame on September 1st.
Absolutely.
That is the biggest opening game of the season. I don't care about anything else on TV. No, Michigan-Notre Dame is the game to watch.
You're absolutely right. And
this restart of a great rivalry. I think it never deserved to be canceled in the first place. But boy, does Notre Dame need this game.
Notre Dame needs it, and so does Michigan. Notre Dame needs it because it's at Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame and Michigan both need this game for the same reasons. But however each team does, if Michigan beats Notre Dame, they need Notre Dame to have a great year. If Notre Dame beats Michigan, they still need Michigan to have a great year, because these are two programs that are always going to be given the benefit of the doubt because of their name, because Michigan has the winged helmet and Notre Dame has the golden dome on their head. So they're both going to be given the benefit of the doubt going into every single football season, but neither team has performed up to how they're supposed to perform recently. Michigan, they're good. They've been good, but they definitely haven't done what they're supposed to do under Jim Harbaugh. And Notre Dame hasn't done a thing since getting throttled by Alabama. So both team needs this win for exactly the same reason. But you're right. Michigan, if they're going to announce themselves to the Big Ten Conference this year, they really have to go in the South Bend and take it to them.
And the team we haven't even mentioned yet is Wisconsin. We haven't even mentioned that they exist in the Big Ten, and yet they still might win everything. They still might win
They're my favorite to win the conference.
Okay. All right. We heard from Keith. He thinks Wisconsin.
Yeah, now people might say, well, Keith is from Wisconsin. I can honestly say that I never grew up a Wisconsin fan, so this isn't a Wisconsin guy trying to, back Bucky Badger here. But if Wisconsin is going to win the Big Ten Conference, this is the year they're going to win it. They really have to show that they can beat a team like, and that's what it's going to come down to, right? Either Ohio State or Penn State probably in the Big Ten championship game. And they have to show that they can beat one of these teams in order to prove to everyone in the country, seemingly, that they are a good football team. They've been a very solid team these past couple years, but they never win the game that they really need to win to prove to people that they are one of the elite teams. And this is the year you really have to do it. With Jonathan Taylor, they're going to ride him all season long. Maybe that will help open up the pass game a little bit, because that's always been Wisconsin's down point. But if they can get that passing game going a little bit to complement that run, this is their year to win the Big Ten and get into that college football playoff.
All right, we'll end it here with the first three conferences. We'll be back with the other two. Don't worry, we have not forgotten about the Pac-12 and the SEC, although it's easy to forget about the Pac-12 sometimes. We'll talk about that and our poll question when we come back on the Cheap Seats, brought to you on Public House Media.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Completely Serious, where we talk about sports and have fun with great guests. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Completely Serious. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, Keith, I'm looking for a pack of Trojans. You know why? Because we're about to talk about the Pac-12.
I was not expecting that one.
Dude, I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. One of my favorite lines from History of the World Part 1. Hey, I'm looking for a pack of Trojans. Shoot, I just ran out.
I like that.
All right, let's talk about the Pac-12, everybody. Basically, this is all right, Keith. I need you to catch your breath here. I know we got off on a great start here, but we got to ride this wave.
All right, Pac-12. Let's go with let's start with the Trojans then, shall we?
Let's start with the University of Southern California.
The most dependable brand of football in the Pac-12 South. I think the Trojans, they definitely have that division. I think USC has a great advantage playing in the South Division of the Pac-12 because they have absolutely no one to play against in their division. Utah, Arizona, UCLA, you never know, but they're not going to be that great this year. And then you have Colorado and Arizona State. So this is USC's division, no matter how you slice it, I think. So you're going to see USC coming away with probably a 8-5, 9-4 record, but that's going to be good enough to get them into the Pac-12 championship game. The other side,
I would love to see Arizona or Arizona State rise from the ashes and overtake USC. I just don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening either. I really want Herm Edwards to have a great year with Arizona State. I've had the opportunity to be around him a couple times, and he's always been the most – I'm just a fan of Herm Edwards because he's always been the most genuine person that you'd expect him to be because he's that same guy off the camera that you see on the camera. So I just want Herm Edwards to do well because I like him. So I really hope Arizona State can get something going. But again, I don't see them or anybody else really challenging USC in that division.
Now, let's go to Washington.
Washington's pretty good.
Yeah, Washington's got a serious shot if they win the Pac-12 outright to make it to the college football playoff. They've got an interesting opener against Auburn, and after that, it's back to the Pac-12 schedule.
Yeah, and that's really the game that they need, right? This week coming up to September 1st. That's the game that they need to win against Auburn because, obviously it's the team that beat Alabama last year, and it's the SEC. And if you can, pin an L on Auburn's record early, that's going to be a huge plus for you because after Auburn, who does Washington have? North Dakota, Utah, Arizona State, BYU. That's nothing. That's a cupcake. So if you beat Auburn, you're not going to play a tougher team than them for the rest of the year. So really, this weekend, this is the make or break weekend for Washington coming right out of the gates.
Do they finish undefeated this season?
No, because I don't think they beat Auburn.
Alrighty then.
So, no, they don't finish undefeated. But again, if your one loss is to Auburn in week 1, and then if you can go 11-0 for the rest of the year, 12-0 including the Pac-12 championship game, if you can be 12-1 after having won 12 straight, that might put you right back into the college football playoff. Sure.
I'd still love to see the defense of Washington, where there's a secondary for Tyler Rapp, their safety. I think he's got a serious shot to be Defensive Player of the Year in a conference where kind of defense goes by the wayside a little bit with the West Coast offense.
Yeah, it does.
Still, I really think Washington could be that sleeper team that makes it in again, but we all know what happened the last time they made the college football playoff. The last time they made it, they were throttled by Clemson on the way to the second installment of Alabama-Clemson.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing, though, when we think of the Pac-12, that's the one thing that's lacking, right? It's the lack of a complete conference. So whatever school that comes out of that conference, it's one of the weaker Power Fives now. I mean, that's really the only way to say it, because when you have a team, because USC's always been that team, right? And when you have USC winning their division by default, it means that you don't have that great of a conference. So I would absolutely agree with you. Maybe Washington can get through that conference, but hey, as we saw, if they put them in that college football playoff, if they have to play Clemson or Alabama, that's going to be ugly, I think.
Now, let's get to the SEC. Let's get to the conference that we all love to talk about, we all understand, and we all know. Let's get to who. All right, let's gauge the conversation like this. Your winner of the SEC is
Alabama.
Who? Okay, we're already off to an interesting start. I think it'll be Georgia.
Okay. I mean that.
I'm gonna make that caveat here. I still think Alabama makes the college football playoff, regardless of if they win the conference or not.
Yeah, and that's one of the. You're absolutely right, and there's no other way to say it other than you picking Georgia to win the SEC. It's not like you're going out on a limb by any means, because Georgia's an outstanding football team, but Alabama. All Alabama has to do is look good in one loss. They have to look good in one loss to a big team, and they're still going to get into that college football playoff. And that's what people want to see, right? I mean, Alabama has been the college football playoff committee, and they've been criticized for putting Alabama in there for having a loss that people didn't think were worthy of a team being in the college football playoff, but they're always in there, and they always seem to win the national championship. So they're always going to get the benefit of that doubt. So, yeah, they can lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game again and still get into that college football playoff. But, we'll see if anybody can pull off an upset. They have to play Ole Miss at Ole Miss in week 3. Now, Ole Miss is nothing to really write home about, but they're very capable of an upset.
I mean, I've still seen this happen where they get that one loss to this one team that's good but not great, and yet they still manage to salvage a good season and make the Final Four out of it. Alabama's consistently a huge question mark in the SEC of will they go undefeated? Will they have that perfect season again? Or will they have that one loss? And if so, who's that loss to? How did they lose it? Where did they lose it? There are so many questions here. And again, Georgia is such an appetizing pick for me because of how great they really did last year.
Yeah, and I think Georgia's a great pick, and I think that they have Jake Fromm as a sophomore. He was a true freshman last year, and he did outstanding for them at quarterback. I think that he's the best quarterback in the conference, honestly. Now, everybody's going crazy about Tua over there at Alabama. He played one half of football, and all of a sudden he's a Heisman Trophy favorite, and he's favored to start over Jalen Hurts. I mean, you're in a pretty good situation there if you're Alabama. But I think that Jake Fromm, I think he's the best quarterback in the SEC, and Georgia obviously has a great team around him with a great coach. So, although I say Alabama's the conference champion, I cannot argue with your pick for the Bulldogs whatsoever. I think Fromm has a great year for them, and I think that they're undefeated going into that SEC championship game as well.
And with that, with Fromm as a great quarterback, you still forget sometimes Georgia's going to have a great running game again. They're going to have DeAndre Swift, the sophomore, and Elijah Holyfield, the junior, in that big 1-2 punch type, with James Cook as a freshman kind of riding along and could still do great things. Georgia's going to have the running game to go with a potentially breakout passing game from Fromm. I think that's a combination so tough to beat.
Yeah, it really is, and that's the cornerstone of a great SEC team, right? A 1-2 punch, a quarterback that can definitely get it done. But you have those big lines, and as long as you have one guy that can run behind that line, But as you mentioned, Georgia doesn't just have one guy that can run behind the line; they have two. So they have a passing game along with a 1-2 punch for the running game. So that's what makes them so scary this year, especially on the offensive side.
Now, Keith, here is where we bring in the poll question, which our listeners can go to our Facebook page and weigh in with their opinions. Yes or no, Keith? Will Notre Dame surprise everybody and make the college football playoff?
No.
Okay. Why?
They don't have the guns to get it done right now. And I think their starter Brandon Wimbush, he's a good player, but I think he's definitely one of the big question marks that Notre Dame has going into this season. So when your biggest question mark for the team is whether your quarterback that you have starting is really the guy, and you're playing what can be considered sometimes a weak schedule, because although you're playing ACC schools, you're still an independent, and you don't have a conference championship game to play. So even if you have a good year, one of those teams that play in a conference that have a championship game have the capability to leapfrog you in that last week.
Now, I want to bring up the fact that Notre Dame could easily go 12-0 this season. They really only need to beat Michigan. When you look at the rest of their schedule, Ball State, Vanderbilt, Wake Forest, Stanford, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh Navy, Northwestern Florida State, Syracuse, and USC. There are maybe 4 or 5 test games on this schedule. Notre Dame's got a serious shot to give the College Football Playoff Committee a huge ulcer if they go 12-0 and can't win a spot in the playoff.
Yeah, and but if they go 12-0, that'll really depend on, man.
I'm listening, Keith. What have you got to say?
Because it's so weird, because I'm thinking, well, if they go 12-0, then how good is USC and Stanford and Michigan? How good are those teams really if Notre Dame's beating them and going 12-0? That being said, I don't know how you don't give a 12-0 Notre Dame team the benefit of the doubt.
That's what I'm saying, Brooksy.
So all right. So let's say that happens. You're going to give 3 or 4 college playoff spots then to the SEC champion, obviously. So you only have one SEC team, the SEC champ, the Big Ten champ, and Clemson. I just put and Clemson in there.
And default. Okay. But again, I still think if Notre Dame makes it past Michigan in week 1, that's their big test of September. Stanford, okay, fine. I'll listen to you on that one. But their huge test game will be Michigan in week 1, when everything is still being figured out and sorted out of who's playing where, who's doing what assignments do people have, what are people good at.
Yep. Notre
Dame's got a serious chance to make a lot of noise and really make the football playoff committee super uncomfortable.
Yeah, but as I mentioned earlier in the show, no matter what team wins, so if Notre Dame wins that, though, they need Michigan to then have a great season, because if Michigan, then limps their way to a 5-4 Big Ten record after losing to Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, that's not going to do anything for Notre Dame. So I would say you're correct, because that's obviously a high-profile game and always a high-profile win. But so much of that depends on how Michigan does for the rest of the year then.
It does, and it always comes down to those 3 words: strength
schedule. You got it.
All right, Keith. Now, you have a way too early prediction for your champion.
You know what? Let's just. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to say that your college football champion is Alabama.
All righty, easy pick. I'm going with Georgia.
Yeah, we're both really going out on a limb on that one.
Super out of the limb picks here. Yeah, absolutely. Taking big chances and bold predictions. But if I really had to pick a super big surprise winner from the swath of college football, right now my pick is my surprise pick to put $1 on and see what happens would be Michigan.
They're going to be so interesting because they have Shea Patterson coming in at quarterback now, and he might be the missing link that Michigan needs, because they've always been pretty good with a so-so quarterback at best. So if Shea Patterson is the quarterback they think he can be, he just might be that missing link for Jim Harbaugh, and he could bring them over that hump.
I still think if they've got to really do is beat Ohio State, and they have a serious shot to make it into the college football playoff.
That would be great. And that's another team that's always going to get the benefit of the doubt, right? It's Michigan. Like those other big name schools, even if you have one of those losses, even if you lose to Notre Dame, they have a whole season to make up for that. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting for this college football season, Max.
Yeah, and 12-game schedule, and you've really got to win every week. Every week is a must-win week, and that's what's great about following the college football world. All right, we've had our Power 5 plus Notre Dame discussion. it's time to make it to the final segment of the show, Wild Wednesday. We will be back on the cheap seats right after this break.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth, co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thank you for tuning into the following broadcast here on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we talk about movie and TV news and reviews, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn a little something about ourselves. If not, then maybe I made you laugh a couple of times. I don't know. New episodes air bi-weekly on Tuesdays. Thanks again for checking out the totally spectacular following broadcast here on Public House Media.
It's time to get wacky, it's time to get wild, because it's Wednesday, everybody, and you know what that means, Keith, right?
Wild Wednesday, Max.
Darn right, that's what it means. We're back with the craziest stats, the craziest stories, the weirdest pieces of history that we can find for this day. Is August 29th. I can't believe it's almost September again, which means it's about time to start up the grill and have some football food. Right, Keith? Let's go over to you. What have you got today?
I have Jose Mourinho going off on the Manchester media in a way that you don't see coaches really going off on anyway, especially in America. Now, it's a whole different culture, you know, over in England and the EPL. But if you had a coach saying to the media what Jose Mourinho said to the media, I think you'd have a much bigger deal. And what he said was, Manchester United, they're off to a terrible start. They're 1-2, and they just lost a big game that they needed early in the year to Tottenham, 3-0. And he's getting these questions that he doesn't like from the media, and he holds up a 3. He holds up 3 on his hand, and he says, "Do you know what this means? This means 3-0, right? It means that we lost 3-0 to Tottenham. But you know what else this means? 3 represents the number of times I've won the Premier League. That's 2 more times than anybody else in this entire league as a coach has won." And he walks off stage saying, "Respect, respect, respect." Just saying, "Respect me, respect me. I've won 3 championships in this league. Respect me. I don't have to sit here listening to these questions." Can you imagine if Bill Belichick did that? If he held up a 5.
Oh, my God. If Bill Belichick showcased any measure of anger short of the seething, "I'm disappointed in you like a dad" kind of anger he always shows at Foxborough, I would love it, because I would eat that stuff up all day. I would watch every Bill Belichick press conference from then on. But, man, I can't imagine a single coach in any North American sport just saying, yeah, but we won. Yeah, but we won. Yeah, but we won.
And
I can't imagine that.
The funny thing about Jose Mourinho now is that I think that part of his attitude is what so many people do. It's one thing that people like about him, but what so many people don't like about him, right? And he's had a rocky relationship with Man United since he's gotten there. And holding up a 3 saying, "I've won 3 championships," that's great, you've won 3 championships, but you haven't won anything with Manchester United. And the best manager, the best coach in the Premier League right now is the guy in Manchester, but it's for Manchester City, and that's Pep Guardiola. He's the best manager in the EPL right now. So, but that's kind of wild. But that was so wild for me, just seeing a manager, seeing a coach just go to the media and say, look how good I am. So I don't have to sit here and listen to your questions because I'm awesome. So that's my Wild Wednesday. I love that.
And I love when coaches have attitudes. Makes it more fun. All right, I've got an interesting statistic for you, Keith. What do the 1904 Washington Senators, the 1939 St. Louis Browns, the 2003 Detroit Tigers, and the 2018 Baltimore Orioles all have in common?
They're all terrible.
You're right. Okay. Let's go deeper. Let's go a little deeper. Why? What's one statistic you think that might make them so bad?
Can't begin to question it.
All right. Now, they have all completed something called a single-digit losing streak cycle.
Okay.
Here's what that means. It means that those teams lost in a row games of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 games. On Monday night, the Baltimore Orioles beat the Toronto Blue Jays to snap an 8-game losing streak to finish that cycle. They have now had losing streaks of every single-digit number.
Wow.
Yep. That's how as bad the Baltimore Orioles are.
That's very interesting. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I was seeing this. I was seeing this on Monday night, going home from the game because I was at that game with my friends. This has been 2 summers in the works of trying to get my friends up to an Orioles game, and because we could, we bought like under $40 tickets to sit behind home plate.
That's the best, isn't it? That's the best.
My goodness. And they're playing the Blue Jays, so there's like no marquee game. There's no marquee opponent. We're just coming in and we're trying to figure out, all right, can Kendrys Morales hit another home run? He didn't. But boy, the Orioles actually won a game. They shut out the Blue Jays, and they made a little bit of history in the process.
And you got to go to a great ballpark while you're at it, right? Camden Yards.
Oh, first. Yes, for one of my friends, it was his first time going to Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And he's an LA guy, so he's a huge Dodgers fan. But outside of the Dodgers, he does not know a whole lot about baseball. Like, he follows his team, and that's it.
That's a very interesting fact there, Max. I did not know that, and I appreciate you dropping some knowledge for me on here for a while. I want to say that's pretty awesome.
Oh, it's great. The single-digit losing streak cycle. Man, they're one of the Orioles are one of 4 teams to have done it now. And Keith, I hear you've got another story for us.
Yeah. So this Wild Wednesday is unfortunately my last here with the Cheap Seats. I stuck around with this show just long enough to upset Max as much as possible, and now it's time to move on. So, no, my schedule is going to be getting considerably a little more hectic. I'm going to be on the road a lot, and don't think that I was going to be able to put forth as much effort and time that this show requires and deserves. So it's my time to step away from the Cheap Seats. However, I will still be around here and there as a guest host and be talking college football here throughout the college football season on the Friday show from time to time. So, Max, hey man, it's been real.
Oh, it's been real. It's been great. And at times it's been horrible, and I've wanted to reach through the computer screen and strangle you. But you know what? That's sometimes what makes better hosts. A little animosity, just a little bit of fire between us made us better.
We need that, right? Not everything can be sunshine and lollipops. You need a little fire and brimstone there from time to time. And I think that we had a pretty good balance of everything. So it's been a pleasure, man.
Hey, I am just happy that we were able to have a show like this where we could air these things out. And we had our differences. Like, we still have things that we completely disagree with that we've talked about ad nauseum on this show. And I'm happy that we were able to do it, because at the end of the day, we sort of accepted that we each have separate opinions. and we're able to live with it.
And that's what makes sports great, right? It gives you the opportunity to have passionate discussion while at the same time knowing that, hey, we can still be friends at the end of the day.
That would be great if we could cross that over into other arenas, but those are subjects for separate podcasts. Heath, thank you again for a couple great months as a co-host. And again, thank you for listening to us today on this Wednesday edition. We'll be back again next week. We'll have another show for you Friday, another show for you Monday for your listening pleasure. More sports talk coming your way on the Cheap Seats on Friday with Matt and Jake. Thank you again for joining us. We will be back, and college football is right around the corner. Thanks for joining us in the Cheap Seats.